Hello, everyone, and welcome to what we hope is the inaugural AirSpace Live podcast recording here at the National Air and Space Museum. Thank you all for coming out. I'm producer Jen. If you listen to the podcast, you may know who I am, and I have just a few housekeeping items to go through before we get started. This microphone here is recording your audience noises. Please feel free to clap where appropriate, and laugh if you think we're funny. In that vein, please silence your cell phones. We do not want your ringtone in our recording. In addition to recording for the podcast this evening, we're streaming over YouTube as well. The episode that will be made from this recording, we're planning on dropping on January 22nd, but the recording that we make tonight will be longer than the podcast episode. It's part of my job to take the 60 minutes that we'll record tonight and turn it into a tight and quippy 30. Another part of my job is directing these recordings. I will be somewhere on this mic, back out of the way. You won't be able to see me, but you may periodically hear my voice pop in and direct just the way that Matt and Emily hear me when we record these episodes in our usual way. If you need to get up during the show, please be mindful of the noise that you're making, especially the chairs that you're sitting on. They make an awful noise against the floor, so just please be careful if you do need to get up. With that, we're going to see a short video, and then Matt and Emily will get us started with the podcast. Thank you.
Was that the video?
I guess that was it.
That
All
was
right.
the video. It was in the show notes as video, and that was clearly an audio clip.
You can tell we've done this many times before.
So many times.
Yeah. But welcome to AirSpace Live. We're recording tonight at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. I'm Matt.
And I'm Emily. Since astronauts started going into space, we have had to solve the problem of what they should eat.
Things in tubes, rehydrated foods, both cold and warm, fresh food deliveries, lettuce that they grow, tortillas instead of bread, and maybe in the future, cylindrical pizza.
Today, we're talking about dining a la astronaut on AirSpace, sponsored by Lockheed Martin.
And we're going to do that twice.
Jenny, you ready for us? They turn your mic off. Okay, we're doing it. This is Jen telling us we have to do it again.
Yep. This is what it's like when we record all the time.
Sometimes we have to do it 3 times.
Welcome
Just doing
to
it twice
AirSpace
tonight. I got it to work.
Hey!
Jen. Okay. Welcome to AirSpace Live. We're recording tonight at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. I'm Matt.
And I'm Emily. Since astronauts started going to space, we have had to solve the problem of what they should eat.
Things in tubes, rehydrated foods, cold and warm, fresh food deliveries, lettuce grown on ships and stations, tortillas instead of bread, and maybe in the future, cylindrical pizza.
Today, we're talking about dining a la astronaut on AirSpace, sponsored by Lockheed Martin. They're so well trained now. Thanks, guys.
So tonight we have some guests with us on stage, and we want to introduce them to you. First, we have Dr. Margaret Weitekamp, who is the chair of the Space History Department here at the National Air and Space Museum.
Delighted to be here.
It says next. Next, we have Jim Sears, CEO and founder of Sated Space, which has patented a very interesting cylindrical space oven that we'll dig into just in a minute.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Quite exciting.
And last but not least, Chef Charisse Gray, who is head of research and development from the Jose Andres Group.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Are you going to start? Do you want me to start? Usually we're on Zoom and we make awkward eye contact to figure out who's going to talk first. That's going to happen a lot.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do it.
You'll do it?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, food. It's not just something we need, it's something we enjoy. Food we like helps to make us feel happy. We look forward to eating meals, and, we don't just need food, we like it, we want it, right? Mealtime is a good time of the day, So it's not such a surprise that for astronauts, food is also very important, right? They need things to eat, and they also need to be fulfilled in their jobs up in space.
Right. We have to nourish astronauts' bodies as well as their hearts and their minds. And food is a really important way in which we can do that. And so I would kind of love to throw this to all of our panelists and maybe start with you, Margaret, a little bit about, from a historian's perspective, right? That's a big perspective that you bring to us tonight, how important the tie and the link between food and morale and mental health is for astronauts.
I think it's absolutely vital. So for the very first flights, with the Mercury flights, they were so short they didn't bring food. And with the Gemini program, when they started with 2 different astronauts flying together at the same time, those were longer flights, and so they started experimenting with, can you eat in space? Will you get stuck in your esophagus if you don't have the gravity? Things like that. By Apollo, they knew they needed to be able to eat meals in order to be able to go to the moon and back. But it's really later when you get into Skylab, things like that, that they start thinking about not just sustaining the astronauts, but also actually enjoying the food. And that's food is social. It's one of the ways that we connect with each other. It's one of the ways that you have downtime, a chance to talk. And so it's really been important with the space shuttle and the International Space Station that's gotten very sophisticated in thinking not just about sustenance, but also about society, about culture.
One of the things I think is interesting about those early years of the Mercury and Gemini program is that astronauts actually tended to avoid meals because the food wasn't always that appealing. And, I can't imagine doing a high-stress job or even a job where you're working on the moon and expending a lot of calories in the course of that and then not feeling hungry when you get back. But on an earlier episode of this podcast, we did interview Harrison Schmitt about working on the moon, and he said it was really difficult for them in the morning to actually work up an appetite before they went out to work on the moon, but that they knew they needed to because they were going to be out there expending, all of that energy and calories. But, it seems like one of the big challenges has been not just providing nutrition, but providing food that astronauts want to eat that actually, gets the appetite going. As, folks who are inventing technologies for making space food and also coming up with recipes for space food, what are the big challenges there, or how important is that, thinking about the appetite of the astronaut?
I think it's really clear that food is really important, right? Food can just be nutrition, it can just be calories, but what we really have to reel it back into is like how is it that we bring culture with us as we do these long missions, and whatever it is that we design and whatever food that we provide for these crew members have to really stand the test against their mental resilience. And so, in the times of the Mercury, we were really asking ourselves the question, like, can we survive eating this food? And so that was the problem that they were solving for. Whereas I think, as we start looking into the future, really needs our guiding light to be as like, can we survive versus, really, can we thrive? Like, can we really make this something that we can all be proud and the crew members can take with them as they are, leaving their loved ones, families, and cultures behind?
Well, so my follow-up question to this is for Jim, because this is sort of it's not just nutrition, right? And thriving is really important in how these recipes are developing. But if anybody in here has ever followed a recipe, which I'm assuming is, I would say most of us, I feel like it's a thing that we've all experienced at some point in our life with different levels of success. But Jim, you're really thinking about the technology today that is important for creating a diversity of recipes. How is solving the problem of helping to nourish astronauts sort of holistically gone into how you've thought about the kinds of problems you need to solve in producing that cooking technology?
Sure. It's really exciting. So for much of my career, I've had a human factors. I'm an electrical engineer, but I'm a human factors engineer almost first. And this is the opportunity to create a machine that allows people themselves to be creative in space when everything else is a built environment around them. But when it gets time to dinner, there'll be perhaps a crew chef, and the crew chef will look at the different folks and say, I can use these ingredients in this machine, these new techniques, to make something just for Joe, or just for the rest of the crew. And for me, it's a great gift, to be able to work on something that's going to be so meaningful for folks and to create that creative instrument that Charisse and the other folks can use.
So, thinking about the history, Margaret, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, there weren't a lot of options when the crews went on those missions. And, as we were saying before, sometimes they didn't find the food really all that appetizing, and so sometimes skipped meals. When we fast forward then to the Skylab missions, this was the first time where the sort of social experience of eating was attempted to be reproduced on board the station. Tell us a little bit about that, attempt to insert that cultural dimension of eating into space.
I have to say, I think some of those Apollo guys were folks who woke up, had a cup of coffee and a cigarette, and got to work.
Yeah.
And so I think that was sometimes a hard habit to break. But it was something that they were really thinking about with Skylab, and they actually invented a kind of little TV tray, a little kind of school tray that would then have spots that you could put the various cans, because all of the food got sent up with the station, and then the astronauts went and met it, so they weren't bringing new things. And they were really thinking about a very, honestly, like floor-oriented sense of eating. They had little ways to lock their feet into the floor and a little table in the middle with the idea that they would have these trays and they would be able to sit and eat together. So there was a way in which they could be social, but they hadn't broken out of that sense of earthboundness. And one of the things, I talked to Sandy Magnus years ago, and she was saying that one of the first things she did when she was on shuttle is sit on the ceiling and eat in the galley. And everybody else was used to sitting in the galley the way that they had been trained in the simulators. And she immediately realized, no, wait a minute, we have this whole space that we can use. So it really changes how you think about it when you get a chance to have enough experience to break out of that kind of floor-oriented sense of sitting around a little table with your tray.
I love that. I mean, I think I've been trying to put myself in the position of an astronaut, which we all know that's not going to happen. But I think about, like, what can you tolerate for a couple of days, right? Versus what can you tolerate as technologies change, especially in space flight. And I think about, how many days can you live off peanut butter and jelly, or how many days can you live off protein bars? And, like, you can probably squeak out a couple of days, especially if you're, like, backpacking and there's, something else you're trying to achieve. But after that, you start, like, I really could use a burger, like something that's been like freshly cooked and has that kind of hot and juicy component. And I feel like as we have kind of gone through a little bit of the history of space food so far, we're kind of approaching the space shuttle and the International Space Station, which are separate but similar, related moments where things really take off.
Ooh.
Thank you, thank you,
You
thank
got it.
you. I just came up with that one. There was a question in there, Matt. What was my question?
Well, maybe as the missions are getting longer, what goes into long-term sort of menu planning for a crew or even for just an individual astronaut?
I guess that's me. So, I've been, of course, had the pleasure to meet with Jim a little over a year ago. And, in this collaboration with him, it really got me and my team into thinking is like, how are we going to create the ecosystem for this? Like, how do we create the ecosystem of food? Looking into, right now, the current technology, and I know this very personally because I made a retort meal that went to the ISS. Jose and I worked on something to do a family meal with the first private mission with Axiom that went to the ISS, and so we created like a little family meal. And so I had the distinct pleasure of going through this process, which I'm not sure, I'm definitely not a scientist. I will say as much as that I can make food and I understand the chemistry behind why things happen, but as far as the outlook on how something is going to go into a pouch and cook it very blindly was not something that I was prepared for. But all that being said is that, it was so bleak. Like when I first opened that pouch, I was like, man, like what is this? And, it's hard to decipher when we got our first package because Axiom was quite kind enough to send us some NASA meals that they were serving to the crew members at the time so that, we could get an idea of what we were doing. I was in the military, so of course I've had MREs before, but this was not what I was prepared for. We should have taken a video of Jose and I opening these pouches and being like, whoa, what is this? And there was something that looked like a chicken breast, and the questions that were like, do we just soak it in water? Do we add water? Like, how are we supposed to eat this? So then he just took a bite of it, and I was like, that doesn't taste good, and so, but, as we start to work with this machine, we started to really think, well, hey, like, how do we build a pantry, right? That's how we have to start this, is we have to say, hey, what are some ingredients that are going to either come to us already shelf stable, or how do we shelf stabilize items? We have a freeze dryer in our kitchen that we have, and so we're like, yeah, let's just start freeze drying everything, and so we did a little bit of that, a lot of failures, of course, in this process, but if we start thinking about the solution representing itself in something that looks more like a standard pantry and finding the ingredients that can have multiple applications for meals, like that's just the very beginning. That is just like where we have to start, and thinking about then how is it that we outfit these missions with all this weight, where we know that of course weight matters when we're traveling into space, and space, like literal space that you can have in a little, briefcase of some sort your food has to fit in. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's really an exciting opportunity because what we've dealt with in the past is essentially backpacking food. It's almost exactly like backpacking food, but there's no pretty picture on the front, and it's got 40% less salt. But the opportunity to actually make new dishes from ingredients changes just literally the math completely. We talked about if you had 20, if you were going to Mars, that's like 1,000 days plus. And if you have 20 meal selections, 20 different type of backpacking entrees, then you're going to eat each one of those 50 times. And maybe after time 15, you might not be as excited about it. But if you have 20 ingredients, you can literally make 1,000 different menu items. You can make more of those, but some of them won't taste good. But you can probably make 1,000 things that taste good. And then you think, okay, what ingredients do I pick? And some will last a long time, and that's what we want, is a long shelf life. And in our own calculus, like we're using things that are basically dry ingredients that you hydrate and you use. But there would be an assortment of ingredients. Some would be long-lasting, some not so. And so, Charisse and I were talking about, it's like, how would we kind of like move through the pantry to eat the ones that have the shortest lifetime first, and the last, the longest lifetime last, and then, be able to deal with targeted nutrition, giving a certain person what they need. And it's like I think it's like a perfect moment for a chef's creativity and artificial intelligence to actually work together to figure out how to apportion it all out.
One thing that I kind of attribute that to is, has anybody seen that video on YouTube? It's probably about like 20 years old, but it's the Access of Awesome or something like that, where they do this like 4-chord song. Tell me, have you guys seen this? Listen, go home, watch it. It's amazing. It's basically this little group of these 3 gentlemen that are playing, and with 4 chords, they claim that they can reproduce the hits for the last 30 years, and it is amazing because it is true.
Yeah, because you throw technique in over the top of that.
So we want to talk to you about the sort of technological challenges or physical challenges of cooking in space. Because, over the years, there have been certain things that have been, problem causing in space.
No
or
crummies, Matt.
Yeah, you can't
No
have
crummies.
crumbs in space, which is why
Or corned beef sandwiches.
Yeah.
That's an Easter egg. Google it. You'll thank me later.
that's one reason why tortillas tend to be the preferred mode of making any kind of sandwich rather than bread, because breadcrumbs are a no-no. You can't have too much salt, as you said, Jim, that everything's a little bit less salty than it would be, and that's partly because salt can cause problems for the body in microgravity, and no alcohol, right? Not that you were going to put alcohol into your,
We would never make
never.
alcohol.
You
with
forgot one of
it.
the most important things in the notes, Matt.
Oh, what's that?
We're definitely sending them with the recipe.
For alcohol? Fermentation?
Fermentation.
All
That's
right.
number 1.
It's in a special envelope. Only open this up.
But that's for the sourdough and the kombucha, I'm sure.
Oh yes.
No, the crushing everybody's hopes and dreams that astronaut ice cream,
Oh,
because
yes.
of the crummies problem,
It's not
is
really going to
definitely
space.
not going to space.
No.
I'm so sorry.
They do
Cans
sometimes
can be
get
delicious.
real ice cream, though, right?
Every once in a while, sneak it into the bottom of a freezer that's coming up otherwise for an experiment. Little treat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But going back to the challenges,
Yes.
Matt, right? Because as Margaret's kind of taken us through some of the changes in technology with time, right? It's still kind of centered around freeze-dried, pre-tinned, and so it's a lot of rehydration and maybe heating it up if you're lucky, which, has a lot of, ick to it after a while, especially if you eat some of those MREs over time, many, many times. But I think you did a good job of taking us back to the basics of like what is the foundation of cooking, and that's building a pantry. But the physical act of cooking also has to go back to basics, maybe. I mean, what are some of the challenges that you two have been thinking about?
Well, on the very basic level, maybe you could start with just like boiling water in space. How does that happen?
Well, first you set the pot on the stove. And then you turn around and the pot floats off the stove. Okay, so let's put the water in the pot, but the water comes out and it doesn't want to go anywhere except just in the air. I mean, gravity, it's an incredible organizing influence in our life. It's like everything around us is basically down on the floor, or bolted. So, but up there, if you want to get heat into something, you have to use forced convection, moving air, or you have to or radiation, which is red hot elements. It's really dangerous to have red hot things in space, or conduction, and that's what we do. So that's like the fundamental thing. And boiling water, funny that you should ask that. And just pull out the hook if I over geek, because I'm so excited about boiling water. That was the first thing, and you can really dive deep as a nerd into dive. What? It's fascinating. We still don't know everything about boiling water, but our cooker uses a centrifugal principle, so that it has a rotating cylinder with kind of a lid with a hole on it, so that when the cylinder is rotating, the cylinder is made out of aluminum, it's got Teflon on the inside, it's got heaters around the outside, and it spins at, like 300 revolutions per second, not as fast as a dryer, would spin. Slower than that, but still pretty fast. You put water in there, and it goes to the inside of the cylinder, and it just forms like a smooth pool around the inside of the cylinder. You look inside there, and the cylinder is just kind of shiny now because it's got a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch of water on it. And then you turn on the heat, and it slowly gets hotter and starts to steam, and then it starts to boil, but it boils differently at different speeds. Like we've got it right up there. You can see the bubbles boiling right now. But as the speed changes, as the speed goes up, we've got 4Gs, 2Gs, big bubbles right now, because it's not the gravity level, but it's actually some trajectories of things. As the speed goes faster and the bubble is trying to build up and go towards the surface, as the cylinder spins faster and faster, it's also going tangentially at the same time. So it's kind of like the bubble goes up, but it's shoved sideways, and it's inside a circular surface, and so it ends up just diving back into the water. And the fascinating thing is, like, the faster you turn the cylinder, the smaller the bubbles get, until finally it's smooth looking. But I look at the power meter; it's still boiling. It's just almost glassy smooth. So that's why I get pretty geek over.
I have so many follow-up questions.
Go deep on water
later.
Yeah.
But how do you take this kind of complexity of simplicity?
Actually, can I break in here? For
Oh my
a
gosh,
second?
do. Hey, Jen.
Before we get too much further, can we do a couple of definitions here? Because we've been talking about some things that we haven't explained. I would love to get a couple of definitions of, Charisse a while ago said the word retort, and I don't know what that means. I would love to know what that means, and I'd like to walk through a couple of the things that we're going to talk about as far as like what we do to the food. So things like rehydration and that sort of thing. And then maybe someone can give us a basic thermodynamic lesson before we go.
I will go first with retort, and I will stop there.
Perfect. Love that.
So while I might not know the scientific definition of retort, I will tell you what I did, which is I took food and I put it into a pouch. Basically, it's like metal. I don't know if it's aluminum or something. It's coated with that, so it's airtight and light cannot possibly penetrate, because that speeds up spoilage of the food. Okay.
Metallized mylar barrier packaging.
What he said. And then I then sealed that, and we put that into a thing that looks like a submarine. Then we closed this big front door on it, and I was like, wow, that food's really going in there. It's laid out all on a single tray, and they basically commercially sterilize the food. They cook it till nothing else could possibly exist in that pouch except for the ingredients that you put in there. So there's no chance of bacteria growth, no viral, nothing. So if you can imagine what eating something that has been commercially sterilized would taste like, that is every dream that you thought of.
So that is what you'd call thermal stabilization, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a follow-up question. Is there anything we have all likely eaten that has gone through this process that we could
I mean a version of it, maybe not in the pouch, but if you ate a canned soup.
Okay. No, that's helpful.
Like,
that's helpful.
Campbell's canned soup, but I think they go through a very, very similar. It's not in this mylar. Well, hit it.
Yeah, barrier packaging. But if you go in the grocery store and you find food in the flexible packaging, like tuna. Some fish,
tuna,
often,
yep.
that's thermal stabilized.
Okay, so it's not awful.
Not awful. Not awful. But you're asking the wrong person.
It is accessible and shelf stable.
Yes.
There we go. Okay.
Yes.
But much of the texture is gone from food when you put it through that much of a temperature processing.
I mean, if I went through that, I don't think I'd feel the same.
No, you'd be a little mushy.
Sure.
I mean, you can definitely take a piece of, you can take something that looks like a piece of meat and spread it on a piece of bread, probably.
Yeah, that's what they do now.
So
It's
glad I had
really
lentils
exciting.
for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the other main ways that things are prepared for space is um, freeze dehydration. Do you want to describe how that works?
I'll do it. I'll do it.
And then I'll.
Freeze drying it was developed in the Second World War to preserve blood plasma. But soon they realized it was really good for military rations, and then the space program was just starting, so it was just the perfect thing. So what freeze drying is when you put a food in a vacuum and you give it just a little bit of heat, then the water doesn't boil out of it, but it sublimates. So it goes out in a way that it leaves all the different pores in the food. So you get a food that is the same size, but it doesn't have water in it. And so that's super good, because you can have a piece of meat at least look like a piece of meat. But when you rehydrate it, often it doesn't have the same texture, because that actually broke down in the dehydration process. It turns out that when you super dehydrate things, you're changing the proteins and the ligands in the food, and you're actually damaging their ability to be regular food. So it's not the same food once you put it through that process. But it's really good at making things last a long time, except that not forever, because there's still a little bit of oxygen in there, and even with no water at all, there's a slow degradation of vitamins, and that's one of the red risks for going to Mars. It's one of the reasons we think, can we even go, because of these time processes.
So whether it's thermal stabilization or freeze drying, the food doesn't come out the way that it started. You don't get as much of the original flavor of the food. And one of the things we've learned about microgravity and space flight is that you need strong flavors in space, right? Because you don't taste the same way. Not you don't taste the same way. But your food does not
Depends how long
taste
the mission
same way.
is.
That it would on Earth, and you kind of crave the stronger flavors of hot sauce and very sweet things. So, we know that they take a lot of hot sauce up to the space station.
I'll just jump in to say that one of the things that happens to the body right when you're in space right now, when you're sitting in gravity, your body's working very hard to push fluids up to your brain to keep you alive and to make sure that everything's working. Well, you get into space and your body keeps pushing fluid up into your head, and you end up feeling puffy and like you've got a head cold. The body can react and remember a little bit how to react, but astronauts will talk about, they have kind of skinny legs and puffy heads, and they always feel a little bit like they're getting over a cold. So that sense that you have that you can't really taste very well, that you're a little stuffed up, astronauts love spicy and they love super sweet, because those are the things that'll penetrate through that. So salsa, sriracha, M&M's candies, those kinds of sweet things will cut through. And so you've got, if I may, a recipe for really difficult cooking, in that you have to get things to be safe enough to go into space, but at the same time, they're going to be tasted by people who are having a hard time anyway, let alone once you bake or boil or, really make the thing safe for them.
Well, that's a situation where you're trying to make it up with sauces. You have, half a dozen sauces, so you're trying to add that flavor. And the magical thing about cooking is that you can do, toasted cheese. What are the flavors?
You can do a lot, honestly. There's a lot of ways to manipulate ingredients so that they can, present in a different medium. Like he mentions cheese as being like a crispy element, but, knowing that crumbs are a big no-no in space. Does anybody know, can anybody guess why crumbs are a bad idea in space?
Shout it out really loud, and then we'll repeat it on the mics.
Okay.
They
Yes,
get
it can
stuck
get
in
stuck in
things.
things.
Yes. They get floating around and they get snatched into an air filter, or they get stuck in an equipment, and then it creates chaos on the ISS or whatever vessel that they're on. But it's like we take this cheese and then we kind of hold it together with a dough, right? We're talking about the pizza now. And it's like you have to find ways to engineer these dishes and these foods so that they can provide the crew members with what they're missing, like crunchy, like strong flavors that they're missing when on voyage.
Yeah, different textures, that mouthfeel, we call it, where a different part of the food feels differently on your tongue and tastes differently, and the way you masticate, the way you chew changes how the flavors. This is all the art that the cooks are able to be put into a dish, which is why we'll never have an end to new cooking creations. It's amazing the palette of what you can do.
We still haven't done the thermodynamics lesson.
Oh, yeah.
Jen, do you just want a definition of those 3 terms?
That would be a great place to start. Jim, when he was talking about the oven, talked a little bit about
He kind of did it, so I thought we were cool, but we should do it more explicitly.
maybe a little bit, or we could just jump into the oven and learn along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or we could just say, Jim, we want to talk about the technological challenges. And, when we think about what an oven does, the ovens that we have on Earth work because hot air rises, right? A lot of ovens work with a heating element on the bottom, and, your hot air gets less dense than the cooler air, and it rises up. And so your food is getting waves of heat coming from the bottom
Called
of the oven.
convection.
Yes, that is convection.
Definition.
Great job, Emily.
But that doesn't work in space.
Do you have any chalk and a chalkboard? Get ready.
That's a different program.
This is a
okay.
podcast.
Absolutely. So yes, convection is a real problem in space. Air, if you have something hot, air just gets hot around it. It doesn't move away. It doesn't move around the cold food. Air is a horrible conductor of heat. We use ovens because we put a lot of energy in it. What we're doing is we're heating things conductively, which means they're going right up against a hot surface. So the many wonderful thermodynamic things about that is that it's very efficient. So the heat is going directly from where the heat is generated into the food. The other thing is it's super accurate as far as the temperature you get to. And it doesn't seem like that's that important until you really understand the food science and what happens, where caramelization happens, where the Maillard reaction happens. That when you can actually use conduction well and change the temperatures, you can really program the trajectory of your ingredients moving into a food. And Charisse is a master at this. I mean, she sent me some recipes of what she's doing. You got like 4 different temperature stops.
Yeah, but that's just because we're, in the process of testing things, we're testing time against temperature a lot of times and seeing what the results of that are. And, we've gotten great results based upon that. But, going back to what we had mentioned earlier, some of the challenges that we're facing, of course, everything that we know to be true about cooking is terrestrial, right? It's like we rely on gravity so much, like baking, gravity, right? It's like we don't think about that. We take that for granted. It's the rule. Like what goes up must it stays there. So it's like so this idea that gravity is something that we are forced to go against. Tied to that is product density. There's somebody on my team that was working on a shepherd's pie because we were really leaning into what's really comfort food, and shepherd's pie was one of them. And so we began, layering the food in and the potatoes and the meat, and then as we started to spin that machine up and increase the G's, the potatoes and the meat reverse themselves in the canister. So we're like, oh, did not think about that. But it required us to take that exercise because we would have never discovered that had we not tried to embark upon that particular dish. But it opened our eyes. So now when we are looking at this device and cooking through with it, density is something that we are thinking about, right? And if we want to make cakes and we want to make potentially breads, the amount of G's that we're putting into that dough, right, it'll impact how it leavens. So, we ask ourselves a question, do we need to increase our leavening? Do we need to decrease G's? And, should we blast temperature so we can get the leaven really quick and then, set it? and then start to increase the G's so that we can add more items into the canisters, right? So there's all these things that is floating around, and
It's a delicious challenge.
it is.
Though, right?
It
Figuring
is.
out.
We eat a lot of mistakes.
I love it.
Well, this brings up something for me that I want to kind of throw back to Margaret, because we have kind of a newer thing in our collection that's out at the Udvar Hazy Center that I don't believe was affiliated with this particular oven, but they kind of did the experiment of what would it take to bake a cookie in space. And the answer was, I don't think it came out great.
They, again, did a lot of experimenting. They worked with DoubleTree, which if you've stayed at a DoubleTree, started with a chocolate chip cookie, and so it's kind of signature for them. And one of the things that they're really thinking about is for long duration space flight, you want comfort. You want something that's going to be nice. So you, at the ISS on space shuttle, or especially the ISS, when they get resupplied, fresh fruits, fresh vegetables are just wonderful. What if you could bake something? That really would be a great thing. So they did a whole series of experiments, I think, experimenting with leavening. If you've tried to perfect a cookie recipe yourself, you might have played around with exactly, how much of different ingredients, how long you baked it, how long. And so the agonizing part of this one is, I think they made the cookies, and then the part of the experiment was to send them back home. And so they had the smell of baking cookies, but not the ability to eat them. And then needed to send them back to ground in order to be able to, it's really an investment in long-term, will you be able to grow some of your own food? Will you be able to cook out of a pantry? Will you be able to bake something? Because some of it's just variety. I mean, we were talking earlier today, and I was talking about, you get a big bowl of Halloween candy, and I don't know about your house, but like slowly all of the stuff that you particularly like gets picked out, and then there's only a bowl of whatever's left that nobody in your family likes. You get the same thing with space food, that they kind of pick through and find all of the recipes that they enjoy the most, and then you're left with more of the kind that you didn't like as much, but you have to keep eating. So being able to vary that by baking, by cooking, by growing something is one of the places where they're thinking it's really psychologically important as much as nutritionally important.
Yeah, one of my favorite Skylab stories is, we mentioned before that Skylab couldn't be resupplied, and yet 3 crews had to work there for a long time period. And the third crew got up and got very cranky that the first 2 crews had eaten all of the good snacks. Right. So, you don't want to be stuck in space with no good snacks.
I think we should skip to the next section, because I know Jen wants us to go there, but also I think that's going to help us get to some of the things that we need to still cover, which is, I think, top of question is, so how did this happen, right? How did the Jose Andres group get involved with space food and a space oven? And I have follow-up questions, but how did this happen?
Or how did the space oven happen in the first place? What drew Saded to that project?
All right, I'll light it up. So I found the solicitation from NASA to superheat lunar regolith, moon dirt, and release oxygen. And I thought, okay, I think I know how to do that. And but I started to work on it in my lab, and I realized this is really hard. It's really dirty. I'm cleaning things all the time. It's borderline dangerous because of the vapors I was going to create. So that I just backed up to boiling water, and then I spent a long time. You could tell I spent a long time on boiling water. I was really, again, deep into the topic. But then once I realized I could boil water perfectly, then I went to making food. And Christmas of 2020, I presented my family with the very first cake made in a cylinder, and then a pineapple inside out cake, and that my daughter named that name. And they're saying, you need to get involved with the chef, a prominent chef. And so they looking around, and they gave me a list, and I saw Jose's name on that. I said I would do anything to work with Jose, because I had so admired him for years. So they sent an email off, and Sam took mercy on us.
Yeah. What was the appeal for the Jose Andres group with this project?
I mean, we were coming right out of, our partnership with Axiom. We had done the ISS meal for the AX-1 mission. And then for AX-2, we really wanted to understand the crew members. And so we quarantined with them before they went on to their flights. So we spent 2 weeks with them. Such a life-changing experience. And so, we were kind of already really 2 feet into this. And, so this opportunity just kind of came up at the right time. Sam, who is a gentleman on our team, gets this email and he's like, hey, Charisse, like, there's this guy that's asking, Jose to come to this. It's like, what are you doing, during this? I think it was in November. Was it November?
It was August.
August.
Is
And I was like, Ohio? I was like, all right. No, I'm kidding. I was like, I'll go. I was like, I'm happy to go. I'd love to meet this. Like, you're talking about cooking in space, like you're talking right up my alley. It is something that is probably not just an interest of mine, but also one that is of Jose's. He is constantly trying to think of ways to find solutions, not just in space, but trying to figure out ways that this could have, Earth-bound solutions and creating them, because the same problems that we face for, space, for feeding people in space, are going to be the same ones that really create us issues here. Food scarcity, space, a complete utilization of ingredients, right? Like, these are all things that we have to approach when we are thinking about problems for space, which fit right in line with what, the work that he does with World Central Kitchen. So it just made all the sense. And so I got on a plane, and
she walked in with, oh, she seems pleasant, we're having a good time, and then so here's the machine that kind of works this way, and it took about that long before she figured out how the machine worked, and we had 3 of them, so we're just like pumping out pizzas and cake, constantly during this thing, and yeah, it was really fun. Just
put me in, coach.
Yeah.
So
Great
how
fun.
does it work? You've described boiling water, which I think was really helpful for me to conceptualize what it sort of looks like while it's happening. But how does it work?
So imagine you've got your clothes dryer. Maybe you've got a horizontal one, and you put your clothes in, you turn on the clothes dryer, and they all move to the outside. They're spinning around the inside of the cylinder. Now, it's actually got hot air going through it, but in our case, imagine that cylinder was heated itself. That would heat all the clothes that were like being pushed up against it by centrifugal force. And that's basically it, is we start the clothes dryer, and then we put ingredients in. They get slammed against the inside, and they just stick there. And like you put thick ingredients in, and you spin it up fast, they will smooth themselves out on the inside of the cylinder to about the same thickness all the way around. And so then you heat the cylinder, you're cooking from that surface on the cylinder towards the center of rotation. And when you do that, you create a hollow cylinder of food after you take it off. And we have a couple of levers, you pull out this hollow cylinder of food, and it's toasted on the outside surface. And on the inside, it's just kind of like the top of a cake. I know,
That was great. I
Yeah.
have so many follow-up questions, and I'm trying really hard to stick to the outline because I have these red numbers counting up on me.
Yes. So
I do have one follow-up question. I'm so sorry. I need to know if you put the ingredients in before you turn it on, or if you put them in after you turn it on, or if that's a yes and situation.
That's if you're in gravity, you can pretty much do anything. But if you're in zero gravity, you got to have it turned on first, because otherwise you'll put them in and they'll want to be out.
So that's a good segue to the question I want to ask, which is, physics says that this should work in space. When do you get to actually prove the concept in space? Is there going to be a test anytime soon?
We hope so, because, we're getting ready to go to the moon and Mars. And if you're going to go to Mars and you're going to be gone for 1,000 days, you sure as heck better have a way to make pizza. Because, it's going to be, you'll need that. So we feel like we have the schedule, the deadline ahead of us. And what we need to do is do parabolic flight which is the flight where the aircraft goes up and down. They called it the vomit comet in the past. We've done a little bit of this, but we need to continually develop all our different parts of our technology in these little periods of zero gravity. Once we've done that, and we've kind of gotten manifested to go on the International Space Station, then we'll keep building the equipment until we're able to meet NASA specifications to do it. So along the way, we're looking for people who want to go on those parabolic flights with us. I mean, Charisse has signed up. We're going to do some experimentation.
You had me at vomit comment.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're looking for sponsors, like ingredient sponsors, and appliances and hospitality, because we're creating the new hospitality of space to come and help us do this development testing and join us. Come up and be part of the team as we do this legitimate, real science investigation of making food in a whole different way.
So you've totally bent my brain on how important gravity is for cooking, because I thought it was just about keeping the ingredients in the bowl, but then when you talked about leavening, I was like, oh my God, it's so much more fundamental and complicated than I ever even thought about. And I'm curious if you've thought about whether or not the moon or Mars, where there is some gravity, does that make it harder or does that make it easier? Or is it, as Jen said, yes and?
Yes, and. I don't know. I think Mars, the challenge, I don't know. It's hard to say. For gravitationally, I'm sure that it is, it is very similar to where we are now. For the moon, I mean, I guess if I had to take the answer is like, would I prefer to cook in some gravity versus no gravity? I would take some gravity.
You've seen your spice cabinet. Imagine opening the door of your spice cabinet. There's no gravity, and everything is floating out into the room.
Because I have a spice drawer.
Oh, well, same thing. Open that drawer. So, gravity is awesome. So we do have to accommodate not having gravity, in our technology. But the fact that we've made something that creates so much artificial gravity that it can overcome Earth gravity, and it still works, means that we can work on the 1/6 gravity of the moon or the 1/3 gravity of Mars. And we might change things up a little bit for 1/6 gravity and 1/3 because we have the benefit of gravity. But still, some of the same things like the intrinsic safety from fire and smoke that we have, they're going to want the same things on the moon and Mars. So we'll be using some of the same technology there.
And power limitations, presumably, will be a thing.
Yes. One thing from an engineering thermodynamic perspective is that heating things conductively uses a lot less power. And so when we're cooking like a pizza that's good enough for 4 slices of pizza, we're talking about 120 watt hours. So it's like 100 watt, well, we don't have 100 watt bulbs anymore, but back in the old days. Anyway, it's not that much power in the scope of everything else. And certainly the power in the food is more than what it takes to heat it. So we have to accommodate the fact that we're heating things fast, but we're being so much more efficient. Like we can cook something in 20 minutes in the sated that would take an hour or more than an hour in an oven.
Margaret, you're a historian of popular culture, among other things. As we think about this sort of future moment of, having a long-term presence on the moon or on Mars, how has science fiction kind of imagined for us popularly what that's going to look like in terms of where the food's coming from and how it's being prepared?
So I think we've seen fictional depictions of having a chef on board a ship that would be preparing essentially in a galley. But there's also been these visions of, Gerard O'Neill's ideas of having these huge orbiting stations that would be out at L5. They were picturing that they would be growing produce. And in fact, there was arguments that they should be including cows to make sure that you could still have a burger. So there's all of those kinds of ideas. I think when you go back even to the 1940s and 1950s, where there were these visions of generation ships, right? Crossing space was going to take generations to get from place to place. The people who would get on board, their great-grandchildren might get off at the other end. And they pictured those being essentially mini cities that would also have places where you would be growing wheat, places where you would be raising cattle or other kinds of animals. So it's been a part of how we've imagined going into space, that we would have to not just pack up all of our food and have it be camping food, but eventually need to be providing the ingredients and actually creating things. And we know now that psychologically is so important, to be able to have some control over how you can make things and what you can eat.
Absolutely. Science fiction is sometimes so accurate, because when someone's creating a novel science fiction, they're thinking of a future that actually exists. And you've worked backwards to the thing that exists. You've got to have good food. You've got to be growing things. So it's great inspiration.
So we want to just wrap things up quickly here with, your hot take, your quick minute on, some questions that we have here prepared. So Jim, what else do we need to solve or to create before astronauts can eat on long duration missions, or eat well on long duration missions?
Enabling technology. You can't have crunchy, delicious food and have those crumbs that we're talking about. You get up in the air and aspirate them, get them in your eyes. If you aspirate them, it could be a medical issue. So what we've done is we've developed, to go along with the sated appliance, is what we call a downdraft table, which is like a table with a tablecloth on it, but it's got powerful suction blowers underneath. So it pulls air down through that tablecloth at about 1 meter per second. So if any crumbs occur in the space above it, they move down to the surface of the tablecloth, and they just stick there. They don't float away.
Like a reverse air hockey table.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect explanation of how the physics of this works. I'm not going to get too deep. But once the crumbs are all stuck there, then you can just use a hand vacuum to clean the table. And this is the enabling technology that allows us to eat potato chips in space and all kinds of other good stuff. So it's as important as the sated appliance itself.
I think my parting question for you, though, is, because I'm now rethinking everything I do in my kitchen and what's easier and what's harder. But what is the thing that you are the most excited about, sort of looking forward, even if it's 2 or 3 or 4 steps down the road, the thing that you're really, I cannot wait until that's the project I get to work on, or the problem I get to solve?
Man, that's a rabbit hole.
Is it a crispy
question.
pizza with no crummies?
No, honestly, it's solving for the ecosystem to make cooking in space really not just a single answer, right? Like in your standard kitchens right now, you have multiple devices that you use to achieve a recipe, right? And so, to me, the exciting part of this whole endeavor is going to be having cooks and engineers have to come together to figure out what are the solutions, and how do we build the technology, the programs, so that we can create this type of food. And it's like there's not going to be there's no silver bullet for this particular problem, right? And so that to me is the exciting part. It's going to be the actual building of it, and creating that ecosystem with engineers and crew members, because it's this is going to take everybody's input. Working with astronauts, working with crew members, working with engineers, working with people like Jim, in order to make that. And then, of course, if we get a crunchy pizza on the other side, then that's just,
Oh, I still remember the day, when I had my first unit and I was at my desk and I was making a pizza on my desk, my office desk. I said, there is no better, heaven for an engineer to be sitting at your desk making a pizza. Yeah. That's what we love. But I would just throw in the delicious synergy that we have with Jose Andrea's group and Charisse, because there's no more fun than enabling creativity. And there's no more fun than thinking about what the future is going to be like. Someone is millions, literally, of miles from home. Their kid's having a birthday. They got this 20-minute delay of a video link, but there's something that they could do, is they can make their own cake, and they can eat their own cake while their kid's eating their cake. And so it's being able to have that close connection that you're not alone, even when you're way far away.
Yeah, and like that just speaks so much to the culture piece, like these travels, ensuring that, travel, airplanes made it so much more possible for us to be a much more unified world, globally, right? It's, I'm Hawaiian, English, and Japanese, and so maybe 150 years ago, I might not be here, So thinking about that and thinking how we can take culture with us on these voyages. I was working with Jacques Pepin once, and he told me something that is like really stuck with me, which is that cooking is how you turn nature into culture. Cool. And like that really kind of puts together like the thought that I really am like trying to build around as we are providing these solutions for food.
I love how casually you just dropped Jacques Pepin. That was wonderful. Well, I can't wait to eat on at a lunar haleo. So I'm looking forward to that day. I think now Jen probably wants to jump in because we are at the 8 o'clock mark.
We are at the 8 o'clock mark, and you guys did really well, and I don't actually have any pickups for you. Yay! We do have one more thing that we need to do before we fully close the program, and that is the credits. I am asking you all, please, 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 please do not get up during the credits. And if you sit nicely, we have some giveaways for you on your way out. Matt will let you know when it is okay and time to get up. Emily is going to be the one who is doing the credits. And you can clap and laugh and whatever during the credits, just please don't get up. The chairs are awful.
I've never been nervous during the credits, but now I am. AirSpace is from the National Air and Space Museum. It's produced by Jennifer Weingart and mixed by Tarek Fuda. AirSpace is hosted by Dr. Matt Shindell and me, Dr. Emily Martin. Our managing producer is Erica Novak. Our production coordinator is Joe Gurr, and our social media manager is Amy Stom. A big thank you to our guests, Dr. Margaret Weitekamp of the National Air and Space Museum, Jim Sears of Sated Space, and Charisse Gray from the Jose Andres Group. And thank you to all of you, our fantastic in-person audience. We couldn't have done a live taping without you. Additional thanks to our stellar AV team over there in the back and downstairs in the cave, as well as our beloved facilities and securities team, and all of the museum staff and crew who made this event possible tonight. Did you know the transcripts of our episodes include citations and extra fun facts? You can find them linked in the show notes, along with the sign up for our totally hilarious monthly newsletter. For additional content, photos, and more, follow AirSpace Pod on Instagram and X. We're also on YouTube Shorts. Check us out on the museum's page. AirSpace is sponsored by Lockheed Martin and distributed by PRX.